First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha, Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to be going into Ezekiel, the first chapter. And just a bit of background on the context of the book of Ezekiel. So I've pulled up here the Eastern's Bible Dictionary on Ezekiel, which at the time of Ezekiel, he was also a contemporary with Daniel. So at this time in the history of Israel, the Babylonians are the superpower at the time. They're the Neo-Babylonian Empire is what's reigning at the time. And by the time of Ezekiel, Nebuchadnezzar had already come to Jerusalem, although when Ezekiel was first taken captive to Babylon, Jerusalem hadn't been destroyed yet, because Ezekiel was taken captive to Babylon right around the same time that King Jehoiakim, otherwise known as Jeconiah or Kanai, was also taken captive to Babylon. And after him, Nebuchadnezzar set up Zedekiah as a puppet ruler over Babylon. He was the last so-called ruler or king or Slakia in Israel, in Jerusalem, before Jerusalem actually got destroyed by the Babylonians. So at this point in time, because you had a series of exiles, right? There were a couple of times when the Babylonians came and took Israelites captives from Israel to Babylon. Daniel being a part of one of the first few exiles, and Ezekiel and Jeconiah being a part of the ones that followed. So I pulled up here the Babylonian captivity and wanted to see what they have on here in terms of, okay, so they have first and second campaign. Let's read this here. This says first campaign, Nebuchadnezzar's siege of Jerusalem, his capture of King Jeconiah, who I just mentioned, his appointment of Zedekiah in his place, and the plundering of the city in 597 BCE are corroborated by a passage in the Babylonian Chronicles. In the 7th year, in the month Kislev, the king of Akkad mustered his troops, marched to the Hattai land, and encamped against the city of Judah. And on the 9th day of the month of Adar, he seized the city and captured the king. Now, this is an extra biblical source that is supporting or proof or evidence as to what we read about in the Bible. For those that refute the Bible as being a valid historical source, this is an extra biblical source where in the Babylonian Chronicles there are records, because remember, in the Bible, whenever a nation came up against the Israelites and subjected them, that was considered a victory for that nation and a defeat for the Israelites. So guess what? Naturally, this would be recorded in a part of those campaigns of the records of whatever nation it was. Hence, you have here a record in the Babylonian Chronicles. He appointed there a king of his own choice, and taking heavy tribute, brought it back to Babylon. Jeconiah's rations tablets describing ration orders for a captive king of Judah, identified with King Jeconiah, have been discovered during excavations in Babylon in the royal archives of Nebuchadnezzar. One of the tablets refers to food rations for Yaukinu, king of the land of Yahudu, and 5 royal princes, his sons. We now have the second campaign. Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian forces returned in 589 and rampaged through Judah, leaving clear archaeological evidence of destruction in many towns and settlements there. Clay ostraca from this period, referred to as the Lachish letters, were discovered during excavations, one of which was probably written to the commander of Lachish from an outlying base, describes how the signal fires from nearby towns were disappearing, and so on and so forth. But pretty much this is the point right here. You had some exiles, they took some captives first or so go around, and then later on, they came back and actually destroyed the city because Zedekiah was conspiring against Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't, I think he wanted to join forces with Egypt. Long story short, it didn't go too well for him. So let's read this part here in the Eastern Bible Dictionary. Once again, this is just a bit of context, like an overview for what's the setting in the book of Ezekiel. Where is Ezekiel? What's the condition of the nation of Israel at this time? What's the condition in secular history? What nation is ruling at this time? So when you read it, you have some context as to what's happening and who are the contemporaries here. So we've established that Daniel was a contemporary because Daniel was also alive during the Babylonian Empire, and so was Ezekiel. Though Daniel was, of course, put in a position of that of a governor and a ruler, Ezekiel was here amongst the exiles. So one of the great prophets, the son of Buzai, the priest, which is quoted in Ezekiel 1 and 3, he was one of the Jewish exiles who settled at Tel Aviv on the banks of the Kibar in the land of the Chaldeans, which is a river. And when you actually look it up, the river Kibar, this is what comes up here. Let's see if I can zoom in on that. So they have some these are kind of like approximations, but you can see you have some Israelite settlements here, and then also down here you have some Israelite settlements in the land of Shinar, and this is where Babylon is. And they put the river Kibar right around here. Okay, right around here. So let's keep on reading. He was probably carried away captive with Jeconiah about 597 BC. His prophetic call came to him in the 5th year of Jeconiah's captivity. He had a house in the place of his exile where he lost his wife. In the 9th year of his exile, by some sudden and unforeseen stroke, he held, which the Most High told him that he was going to take out his wife. And actually, when you read the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel is in Babylon with the captives of Judah, but the Lord tells Ezekiel to prophesy against Jerusalem, and he actually shows him some of the wickedness that they're still committing over there in Jerusalem, in the land. And this was prior to it being destroyed. And the Lord has him prophesy against them, and then the Lord has him prophesy in different aspects as well. He had a prominent place among the exiles and was frequently consulted by the elders. His ministry extended over 23 years. They put it about 595 to 573 BC, during part of which he was contemporary with Daniel. Right, this is what I was going to say. I was going to say that in an example here is Ezekiel, where the things he had to go through or the things he had to do, the Lord made him do, and a lot of it was symbolic to represent the condition that the Lord was going to bring upon the nation of Israel. Same with another good example is Hosea having to marry a harlot. His life, the things that the Lord commanded him to do were to be a representation or even a foreshadowing of what was going to happen on a greater scale. And that was the case for a lot of different prophets and different instances. Where are we at? So he was contemporary with Daniel, meaning contemporary meaning that they lived at the same time with Daniel and Jeremiah, and probably also with Obadiah, because remember, Jeremiah was also prophesying about the Babylonians coming up into power, and he was there when the Babylonians came and destroyed Jerusalem. The time and manner of his death are unknown. His reputed tomb is pointed out in the neighborhood of Baghdad at a place called Kephil. So now let's go to the book of Ezekiel chapter 1, the vision of 4 figures. And in the first chapter, it's really going into Ezekiel with the Lord coming to Ezekiel in the form of a chariot, and the different angels that Ezekiel saw. He basically describes this in vivid detail, describes the chariots, the angels, and the form that they were in. And keep in mind that angels have different forms. There's some chapters in the book of Revelation that describe some angels having eyes round about them, and so on and so forth. And there's some angels that come and they can just look just like a regular man, and some can come looking, having features of a man, but having some extra features on top of that. So Ezekiel chapter 1 verse 1. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Kibar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. In the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity. So at this point, and this is how he's dating it. So at this point, he's a captive in Babylon. You have other captives, which are Israelites in Babylon. You also have the king, Jehoiakim, who's a captive in Babylon. Verse 3. The word of the Lord Yahweh came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the river Kibar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him. So this is when the word of the Lord came on to him, i.e. he got his calling. Now, we know that Ezekiel would have to be a Levite because it says here he was a priest. And we know that at least during this time, you couldn't be a priest if you weren't of the tribe of Levi. At least an actual priest. The priests were from the Levitical tribe. Okay. Verse 4. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Now first let's look up this amber, say amber color. So amber's, when you look it up, this is what you get. It looks similar to fire, right? If you look at an amber stone, which is pretty nice. I mean, sheesh. Look at that thing. That is a nice one right there. So Ezekiel says he sees this whirlwind, and it's like a great cloud, which is a chariot, but he sees it looks like fire enfolding itself, right? He sees that it's super bright, and in like the middle of it, he's getting this like this amber color, this bright amber color right in the midst of it. Verse 5. Also out of the midst thereof. So as he's looking at this fiery whirlwind in the air, from the middle of it, right, came the likeness of 4 living creatures. So he sees these 4 creatures coming out from the midst of this whirlwind. And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. So they looked humanoid. I mean, they looked like men. Like they had a head, arms, legs. They had that figure. And every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings. So now you can imagine, he sees these man-like looking creatures, but they have 4 faces. So let's pull up an example here. Let's say like, let's just type in, let's see, maybe a 4-faced statue. Okay, so now obviously we know that they didn't look like this, but the reason I'm pulling this up is to show you what does a head actually look like, a head that has 4 different faces on it at the same time. Like what would that roughly kind of look like? So maybe one of these. So these are just some regular depictions of statues that have more than 1 face. Okay. Now, whether it looked exactly similar to, I don't know. I wasn't there. We're reading it all together. But this is just to give you an idea. So he sees these angels, because that's what these creatures were. They were angels. And they look like they have the form of men, but they had 4 faces and 4 wings. So you can imagine maybe something like a butterfly. You see how a butterfly has like those 4 wings, the 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. But chances are the wings didn't look like butterfly wings. They look like, actual wings. Maybe how you would imagine like an angel's wings to look. Verse 7, and their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. Now, a calf's foot is cloven footed, right? A calf is cloven footed, meaning that when you look at a calf's foot, it's divided. Like if we look here, calf foot, No. Did I spell this wrong? Animal. Foot. See, here's a picture. So you can see, this is what it means when something is cloven footed, meaning it's divided. The hoof is divided. Okay? So when he looked down, he saw the feet looking like that. Now, whether it was that they actually had feet that looked like that, being that they had the 4 different faces, or maybe it was just something that they were wearing that looked like that. But anyway, continuing on. So he sees them looking like this, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass, which burnished brass is similar to burnt brass. This is pretty much the same kind of description that the Apostle John gives when he sees the Lord in his vision in Revelation 1:13-15. This is also a similar description that Daniel gives when he saw the Lord in his vision in Daniel the 10th chapter. So that lets you know that these angels are actually brown skin. Okay, brown skin. And they give that they radiate, they give that bright appearance because they're in an angelic body. Verse 8, and they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides, and they 4 had their faces and their wings. So he saw 4 creatures, all 4 had 4 faces, and all 4 had 4 wings. Verse 9, their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. They went every one straight forward. So you can imagine when these angels were moving, and it's gonna expound on this later on, they didn't have to turn their direction. Like when you were moving, for example, if you're walking forward and you want to make a left, you can't just slide like sidestep, right? You would turn your whole body and turn your direction into the direction you want to start walking in. But the angels don't have to do that, because if you can imagine, maybe like an angel is hovering in the air, for example, if they're moving, they don't have to turn to the left in order to move to the left. They can just hover to the left, hover to the right. Verse 10, as for the likeness of their faces, so these 4 faces they had, this is what it looked like. They 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. So the 4 faces that they had, if you can imagine, maybe you look straight forward at them, you see the face of a man, and then on the right side is a face of a lion, and on the left side is a face of an ox, and then behind is a face of an eagle. Which these faces he saw, but these faces were also symbolic because they actually represent different characteristics of the angels. When you take a look at the face of a man, the man really represents intelligence, because of all the different creations, all the different beasts, you could say, man is the most intelligent. I believe in the Apocrypha, there's a scripture that says that the Lord imparted into man the 5 senses, like the senses of the Lord, and then he gave them the way of understanding to interpret speech and cogitations. So man is the most intelligent. So the face of man represents intelligence. The face of a lion represents boldness or courage. And there's a precept, which I have loaded on here, Proverbs 28:1. The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. So you notice that this precept is comparing being bold to being like a lion, because that's one of the traits or characteristic of a lion. And then we have the face of an ox, which represents strength. And that's why when you deal with, in the ancient world, for example, when you would plow, they would plow with an ox because an ox was strong and they could pull the plow while the plow is being pressed down into the earth to break up the earth. They wouldn't use, a dog or something like that, because it's not built to be able to pull such weight. So they would use an ox for its strength. And they 4 also had the face of an eagle. And an eagle represents their ability to fly and also that swiftness. Because typically when you look at the eagle, I think the eagle is one of the highest flying birds, if I'm not mistaken. Is the eagle the highest? Okay, it says here the griffin vulture is one of the highest flying birds, yada yada. But an eagle is also one of the highest flying birds. Has to be, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Yeah, I'm sure if you do some more research, some more digging, you'll find it in there. But the point is that eagle represents flight. Okay, so this is what Ezekiel is seeing, and he's continuing to describe what he's seeing. And you can imagine how intense this could be, right? If you look, man, if I saw creatures coming out of a whirlwind with 4 faces, looking like this, you gonna see them prayers going up faster than light, because that's not something you see every day. You know, that's not something you see every day. We don't play that. All right, but the point is, it must have been a pretty intense and fearful vision, a fearful thing for him to see. Nevertheless, verse 11, thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. So you can imagine they had regular human-looking bodies, but their 2 upper wings are pointing upward, like they're stretched up, and then the 2 lower ones are sort of covering their body. And they went, every one, straight forward. Whither the Spirit was to go, they went, and they turned not when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like the burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. Now, sometimes as well, when you read through some of these chapters, is always good. You can also look through some of these other translations, because depending on the verse you're reading, sometimes these translations like the NIV or the NLT, they'll actually give you a misunderstanding, because they'll try to include an interpretation instead of just translating the word into more modern English. But there's also times when it just gives you another or more modern wording of the same thing. So sometimes having those verses in different translations in parallel can bring more clarity as you're reading the verse. And that's why occasionally you'll see us read a particular verse in the King James Version, and then we might read the same verse in the NLT or in the NIV to sort of tie it all in together, so you can get a more modern wording of it. So if we take a look here for this verse in the NLT, what it says here is the living beings look like bright coals of fire or brilliant torches, and lightning seemed to flash back and forth among them. NIV also says the appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. So that's the main emphasis here. Okay, that they had that bright appearance. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. So that's how fast they were moving, almost like they were teleporting. Because when lightning strikes, it's very quick, right? You can barely, it's like a glimpse, like you see it appear over here, and then next thing you know, it appears over there. And then next thing you know, it appears over there. So they were moving very quick. Verse 15, now I beheld the living creatures, or now as I beheld the living creatures. So as he was looking at this, he was seeing this, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his 4 faces. So now he saw a chariot. That's what the wheel is. And it's going to tell you as we keep on going. Verse 16, the appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl. So the appearance and the way it was put together, the way it looked, the color was like the color of a beryl. Let's look up beryl. Color So here's what we have, and you look up barrel. Yeah, it's sort of like a greenish, you know, I'm sure they have variations of it as well. So you might not, you know, this might not be the exact color, but for the most part, it pops up to sort of look like this greenish thing, you know, at least from what I'm seeing on here. Nevertheless, and day 4, where we at? Yeah, so their work was like onto the color of a beryl, and day 4 had one likeness. So they all looked the same, meaning they were all designed the same. And their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. So the chariot that he saw, the 4 chariots he was looking at, the way they were designed, it looked like a wheel within a wheel. So like an outer disc and an inner disc. This is basically the if you type in, let me see, if I type in a UFO, this is like the most common shape you'll see when you type in a UFO. You see, you have and it makes sense why, because as we keep reading, you'll see why most UFOs you type in, the depiction looks like this. It always looks like a disc and a smaller disc in the middle, and then lights all around it. And you'll see why. But pretty much this is like a description here. This is a little picture image right here. So this, you can see it looks like you have an outer wheel and then an inner wheel. Continuing, verse 17. When they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them 4. Now, keep in mind that what Ezekiel is looking at, he's trying to describe as best as he can. So when he's talking about the eyes and this, it's not actual eyeballs, like human eyeballs on the chariots that you can see blinking. What he was referring to as eyes were the windows, which had lights, because the chariots have light. So if you look at something like this, okay, he was chances are he was seeing something similar to this, and the lights round about it. Okay, which looked to him like eyes all around it. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go. So the chariots, which today the world calls UAPs or UFOs, they are not, according to this vision here, these chariots were not controlled by somebody having to be inside of the chariot and then using a steering wheel, you know, in some way, shape, or form. It was controlled by the spirit of the angels. So wherever the spirit of the angels was to go, that's where the chariot went. Which is why the angel didn't have to be inside of the chariot in order for the chariot to move, because they could control it with their spirit. And you think Esau's technology is advanced. It says, and the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When those went, these went, and when those stood, these stood. So the living creatures are the angels, the wheels are the chariots. And when the angel went, the chariot went. And when the angel stood, the chariot stood. And when those, and it makes sense, right? When you look at how the chariots are able to maneuver, when you compare driving a car or a motorcycle or something like that to maybe something like this, there's a what's the word I'm looking for? I forget the exact word, but there's some latency between somebody driving a car and somebody maybe controlling a chariot. That's why you can have accidents happen, because you may see something, but you may not be able to react in time if you're driving a car. Why? Because you need to now turn the wheel to the left. So the time it takes you to, before, like when you see maybe an accident about to happen, to you now turning the wheel to the left, shifting the gear, stepping on the gas, stepping on the brake, you maneuvering all these controls, that's taking time. And then you might not have enough time to do all that before boom, another car hits you. But imagine if you could drive your car with just your spirit, like what you feel, what you think, that's what happens. You eliminate that whole period of latency of having to actually grab the steering wheel and turn it and hit the brakes, and because you can do that just through your spirit. That would allow you to actually maneuver your car in a less restrictive way. So when you look at how these chariots move, it kind of makes sense as to how they're able to move so fast and maneuver in such ways and stop and turn, and they move without restrictions, without adhering to the laws of even physics or whatnot. So that's some very advanced technology right there. And these are the chariots that the Lord is coming back with to to take over this place. That's in the book of 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter. And that's why the armies of this world are not going to stand a chance. Continuing on, verse 21. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature was as the color of the terrible crystal stretched forth over their heads above. So he first saw this whirlwind. He saw these angels coming out of them. He saw the description of the angels. He saw the chariots. And then he sees this it almost like a cloud, like a firmament. Because the firmament is like the sky, right? Like the clouds above these angels. So you can imagine possibly like a chariot that's cloaked within a cloud up there, like a super big one. Because then he describes it as the color was like a terrible crystal, right? And it was stretched above the heads of these angels. So there's like a big chariot up there. And under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other. Everyone had two, which covered on this side, and everyone had two, which covered on that side their bodies. So you can imagine maybe like their wings are now wrapping around them to be able to cover them. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty. Now, if you've ever had a bird fly low and just like fly past you, or even take it down to the size of a bee or a housefly or a bug that can fly, when they fly past your ear, you hear that sound of their wing flapping or their wings flapping. Whether it's like a or whatever sound it is, and that's them flying past you. And even look at how small they are, but yet you can hear the sound of their wings flapping. So now imagine an actual angel, the size of their wings, and how loud it would have to be when it's flapping, because their wings are cutting through the air, and it's like a So that's why he's saying now when he heard the noise of their wings, so their wings, as their wings are flapping or moving, it sounded like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech as the noise of an host. And when you actually look up the word speech here, it goes into like a rushing sound. I'm just giving sound effects now, but you can sort of imagine what that would sound like. When they stood, they let down their wings. And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and had let down their wings. So now that giant firmament cloud chariot looking thing at the top, he could hear the sound of it. Verse 26, and above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. So now let's look up a sapphire stone. All right, this is what we're getting on here. Now, it may just be me, but it's possible too that you may have different color variations of the sapphire stone out there. but for the most part, this is sort of what comes up here. So like I said, these are just depictions from what we can see now, but I'm sure they're especially for those that are more into stones, have more knowledge of it, you would know that there are more variations and so on and so forth out there. But these are some nice stones, man. Sheesh. Okay. So now he sees above that firmament that was like the color, that was above the angels. He sees like this figure of a throne as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. So he sees like this throne, and he sees like a figure of like a man that's sitting on this throne. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within it, from the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward. I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about. So he's basically witnessing the majesty of the Lord. So he sees this figure sitting on a throne, and pretty much just like it looks like fire is round about him from his midsection up and down. As the appearance of the bowl that is in the cloud in the day of rain, i.e. the rainbow. So was the appearance of the brightness round about. So the aura that was radiating off of him, it was similar to like when you look at a rainbow after it has rained, and you can see the rainbow has like different colors and so on and so forth. So he could have been seeing a different layers of this vibrant radiation that was coming off of him. When I say radiation, I don't mean like nuclear radiation. I mean just the aura, the light, the fire, the energy that was radiating off of the throne and off of the Lord. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, Yahweh Ba'asham Yahweh Shai. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. So this is when the Lord came to Ezekiel, as he was a captive in Babylon. So the angels pulled up, and then the big giant chariot at the top, with the throne on top, he saw that. And it's you can very well understand why he said he fell upon his face. And then he heard the voice that spake. So now from here on, we're going to go into, now the Lord is going to be dealing with Ezekiel. He's going to tell him, okay, this is what I need you to do. I need you to say this. I need you to do that. I need you to do this, so on and so forth. Okay, but this is pretty much the book of Ezekiel, the first chapter. It's really just a description of the vision that Ezekiel received of the angels and the Lord and the chariots. All right, so with that, Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rekha, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.